Hey everyone! Today we are going to be learning about geometry in motion. We'll be describing motion in three different ways. Three different ways to describe motion are a translation, a reflection, and a rotation. Now we have an idea of what each one of these types of motions would be, but let's look at the definition. First, let's start with the translation. A translation is a slide of a figure from one position to another. So let's write that here. Let's copy down this formal definition of a translation and then look at our diagram to make sense of what this says. Again, translation is a slide of a figure from one position to another. So this mapping that we see here with these dotted red lines show you first triangle and then its location. Now let's define a reflection. A reflection is a type of a translation or a type of a movement in geometry where a figure flips over a line. Again, after we copy this formal definition of a reflection, which is a flip of a figure over a line, let's take a look at our diagram. First, we have this blue triangle, and then to describe its motion as a flip over this line, it would land on this green triangle. This type of a motion is a reflection. And then our third type of a movement in geometry is the rotation. This is when you turn a figure around a fixed point. Again, after we copy this formal definition down, to turn a figure around a fixed point. Let's look at our diagram example on the side. Again, here we start off with this blue triangle. And to describe its motion geometrically, we call it a rotation about this fixed point. Now let's reinforce our knowledge of these first three definitions. Let's try to identify each motion as a translation, reflection, or rotation. So, based on our three options, it appears as though this entire diagram has been rotated about a point. Again, you can also look at how the movement moved from each corresponding vertex. So for example, we have one dashed line right here describing the motion from this vertex to this vertex. Also, we can do the same from this vertex to this vertex. It looks as though we have a similar situation where all of the points have been rotated about a point. That point would probably be approximately down here. So number one is an example of a rotation. Example two, again by definition, we have a diagram, a geometric figure given by this blue quadrilateral, and it's being flipped about this dashed line. Based on that, this type of a movement is called a reflection. Finally, let's look at this third example. Here it shows these two dashed lines, which represent a glide from one set of points to another. This example is a translation. Oftentimes, you'll hear the term mapping used. A mapping is a one-to-one correspondence that describes a pre-image to its image. So the three previous examples that we looked at were different types of motion that would describe a pre-image to an image location. So here we would say that A is the pre-image of image D. Point B is the pre-image of point E. And C is the pre-image point of point F. And basically, when we connect our points, our pre-image, and connect the points of our image, we've now described a one-to-one correspondence. So this example and this diagram is what we would use to describe a mapping. Another term we use in geometry when talking about geometry in motion is a transformation. A transformation is a one-to-one mapping, but we use symbols to describe this one-to-one mapping. So in the diagram that we just did, we would use notation as triangle ABC was mapped to triangle DEF. And this mapping is called a transformation. So let's look at these examples here. In the figure, it says that triangle XYZ was mapped to, again, that's what this arrow will be used for, mapped to triangle ABC by a reflection. So we want to name the image of angle X, meaning, where did angle X go? Well, we could do this two ways. We could look at the diagram. X was clearly mapped to A. But if that isn't clear, we could also recognize it in the correspondence or the order in which the triangles were named. We want to be very certain that each point or each angle within triangle XYZ matches with all of the angles in triangle ABC, meaning X is the pre-image of A, or in other words, A is the image of angle X. So let's look at that example here to make more sense. So we would say that angle X was mapped to angle A, therefore angle A is the image of angle X. And again, in example 5, it says to name the side that corresponds to segment AB. Well, again, let's use our diagram as a tool. So if I'm looking at AB first, this is the image of pre-image XY. And also, since we have defined our reflection by the mapping triangle XYZ mapped to triangle ABC, we can say that AB, since they are the first two in the name of triangle ABC, corresponds to segment XY, since those two are the points that are named first in triangle XYZ. So we would say that segment XY is the segment that corresponds to segment AB. So now that we've talked about the three different motions, a translation, a reflection, and a rotation, and we now know how to describe a mapping, from one image to a pre-image, or from a pre-image to an image. This completes our introduction to geometry in motion.
Made with Doodlecast Pro.